Once I started learning to give it my all instead of giving what I'm comfortable with, that was when I really started breaking through and pushing that bar higher.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan Devlin, and welcome to this Struggle Climbing Show Pro Clinic with Will Anglin and Michael Rosado from Tension Climbing on system boards and how we can all use them to maximize our training, performance, and enjoyment of this sport that we all love so much. These guys are super geeks when it comes to board climbing and culture and design. They've been obsessed with it for a long time now, and aside from the Moonboard, I'm pretty sure the Tension has been around the longest in the game here. They were the first to design an adjustable angle board as well as a board with a mirrored layout with their original Tension board, and now after many years of R&D, they've released the TB2, their newest board, which I've spent some time on, and I gotta say, it lives up to the hype, man. This thing's amazing, and while we explore a lot of the concepts in this Pro Clinic here through the lens of the TB2, the topics and the beta are applicable whether you climb on a tension board, moonboard, kilter board, grasshopper, spray wall, or all of the above. And if you've been following my training journey here over the years, you know that board climbing just in general is a huge struggle for me. So whether you're brand new to this kind of thing, maybe you've never even been on a board, or like me, you've been struggling on it for a little bit, or you're just out there crushing V double digits on the system board like Will Anglin, today's clinic with Will and Michael has a ton of insights for you. In it, we're covering beginner, intermediate, and advanced tactics on the board, how to utilize an adjustable angle board for faster gains, the pros and cons of a mirrored layout, how the popular boards out in the market today differ, and then my favorite part here, because I'm predominantly a sport climber, we spend a good hour talking about how to utilize a board to train endurance and power endurance for sport routes. Michaela Kirsch, who was a guest on this show a little while ago, talked about how she trained for La Rambla, a 5:15 that she sent in pretty short order, almost exclusively training on a board. Super interesting part of our conversation there. Honestly, this is just a masterclass on all things board training. I am so psyched that you are here for it. Now, as you probably heard in the past, I usually fade out the Pro Clinics around 30 or 40 minutes in, with the full version available only to patrons and subscribers of the show. It's one of the big ways that I'm able to keep the lights on over here in the podcast/utility closet. But our friends over at Tension have been gracious enough to make this full Pro Clinic available for free to everyone, which is just so rad of them. And by the way, they're also hooking you guys up. If you want to order anything from the Tension site, you're going to get 15% off using code STRUGGLE15 over there. That includes tape, shoe spray, hang boards, no hang tools, apparel, etc. It doesn't include the Tension board sets. Sorry about that. But we do talk about the tension board sets and all the hardware and all that stuff towards the end of this Pro Clinic, so you can get a sense for the cost there. But on everything else, I think you're going to get 15% off using that code STRUGGLE15. So thank you, dudes, for hooking up the audience. And lastly, keep an eye out on our Instagrams, because we are doing a pretty sick giveaway together as this episode comes out. All right, let's build some strength, power, community, and of course, tension with Will Anglin and Michael Rosado. Well, you guys look good. You sound good. I think we can just roll right into this. I'm super psyched for this conversation for a lot of reasons. I've tried out the TB2 and had some sessions on it, and I can't wait to dive in and kind of get your thoughts, through my lens. And also, one of my biggest struggles, and we love struggles over here on the Struggle Climbing Show, is board climbing, just in general. And I'm definitely going to be coming at this conversation, I think, a little bit more of a noob, maybe even a little bit skeptical on board training, just kind of through my own experience and how I struggle to, I think, utilize the tools like that and maybe the way that they're best for climbers. And I'm also quite aware that I probably stand to improve the most if I put some more time in on some systems boards. So really psyched for you guys to join because you bring such an incredible perspective, high level of expertise, of course, creating the products that you do, but also you've been of the board culture. You've been on all the boards out there. And so I'm excited to just dive in and explore this landscape with you. Thank you, Michael and Will, for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so maybe a good place to start will be struggle. This is how I like to enter every conversation with our guests here. And so, Will, let me kick it over to you. Where do you struggle in your climbing? And maybe even more specifically, where do you struggle when it comes to climbing on your boards?
Yeah.
Or does it all just come easy?
No, nothing's ever easy. It's hard. That's the point. You got to like that.
No, that's why I don't like it.
It never gets easier. You just then try a harder climb and it's also hard.
Right.
So yeah, the struggle doesn't end, and we don't always want it to. I think the one of the things that I struggle with the most right now climbing is actually going climbing.
Like outdoors.
Yeah, actually going outside and climbing. And most of I guess all my goals specifically are end up being outside. And there's, a level at which you kind of just, if you're not trying the project or going outside and climbing on rock, you're just never going to do the things you're trying to do.
So the goal for you, though, is, and we'll get into this more as we discuss, of course, how boards fit into an overall, climbing strategy. But obviously, you enjoy climbing on the board, but you have real and specific goals outside that are at limit. And so if you're not getting out to them, you're saying then, no matter how much training you're doing, it's not likely to come together.
You just never do it. Yeah, that's just kind of how that works. And so I've been busy, and so it becomes tough. And then, but I found more time recently to get out. Actually, I have to have knee surgery in like 12 days, and I'm going to be out for the whole season. It's really a bummer, but
sorry,
I kind of found out a couple of days ago.
Brutal. You'll be doing a lot of campusing on the board, huh?
Yeah, well, it was kind of so you asked about like what's my, where do I struggle on the board, and board climbing in general is something that I struggle with. I typically excel more when there's like some dimension involved, and like the more kind of technical it gets, the better I tend to do. But I've been leaning in on the boards for probably like really leaning in maybe in the last 2 years, really when we were kind of first doing the final prototyping of the TB2 and getting all that rolling out, just have spent a lot of time on that. So I'm actually like way stronger than I've ever been in like every conceivable way. But then when I go out and try and climb on my projects outside, it's not like a one-to-one thing. I haven't been rock climbing much. I've been mostly board climbing. So I feel like I've got really strong. But there are certain skills that I need to like go out and actually polish up to actually realize the benefit of that, strength and power increase. And to an extent, the technical progression that I've had on like that board style it's not technical. It is technical. There's tons of different techniques that are really kind of accentuated on boards, and those are important too. And those are things I've improved on over the last 2 years, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. I've experienced that myself, just spending a little bit more time on the board in preparation for this conversation here. There's certainly a high level of technicality that can come into play, particularly on the TB2 with just the wide variety of feet, textures, dual text, wood, and the sizes and the angles of them. I was acutely aware of how garbage my footwork was when I got on that TB2. Yeah. So that'll be an area that I think we explore. But I like, your point there, I think is well made, which is, there's developing strength and power, and then there's applying that in a technical way to a very specific thing. And obviously there's kind of an adjustment period where you have to take that strength and that power from the dojo and get it out onto a block of granite or whatever it might be that you're working on. And so I think it'll be good for us to peel back a little bit more on that, especially as it comes to somebody like myself who's fairly new to this world, and others who, maybe have a board that just came into their gym, or they've been avoiding it. It's been in their gym forever. And, how can we best use that to improve whatever our goals may be? And some people have goals to climb just inside and build the community around the gym. Some people have a community online and they've got a board in their garage. And some are using these tools specifically to help them level up for their goals outdoors. And we'll peel back on all of that in a little bit here. But Michael, I want to kick it over to you as well and get some struggle from you as a climber, and also just as it relates to the board.
Yeah, mine and Will's struggle are pretty similar, except the reason we struggle with them is a little different. I have trouble getting outside and projecting, but and I'm very busy as well, so that is a factor. But I I am kind of lazy. I've always been a lazy guy. And when I moved out to Colorado from the South, I mean, the South, you know, especially like a place like Horsefins, which is my local crag, you could just drive 30 minutes, get out of the car, you're at the boulder, and not only at the boulder, you're surrounded with things to do,
Right.
you know. So there was minimal effort as far as it is concerned. So ever since I've been in Colorado, which is, I mean, hell, 7 years now, I've just had a constant struggle with getting out, especially during alpine season, getting outside and actually putting in the work on the projects. Like, I love outdoor climbing, but I love board climbing too. And sometimes, like, if I'm not feeling it, I'll just go to the board and, you know, and get my workout in. So yeah, my struggle is getting outside and putting in the work when I need to.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And as a fellow busy weekend warrior here, and a lot of the people that listen to this show are not dirt bags or professional climbers. We do have our share of those. So shout out to you all that can dedicate the most of your day every day to this sport that we love so much. But, you know, for many of us, whether we're full-time students or parents or we travel, we've just got a really hectic job. The allure of being able to get in a really hard, dynamic, fun workout that also has community and a little bit of a gamification element to it, you know, board culture in general, and I'm speaking of Tension, but as well as, you know, Moon and Kilter and Grasshopper and the others that are out there, the kind of the community that's built around it can give you a little bit of a sense of that energy and that stoke of being at the crag, but you can do it in 45 minutes instead of giving up 6 hours, you know? So I see the allure there and I see the draw there, and I'm excited to explore some of this because I consider myself relatively new in board climbing and board culture. And I think we can maybe just spend a few minutes doing an overview of board climbing and culture in general, and then also where Tension has fit into this story now with the release of the TB2. It's the second board. So, you know, you've been innovating in the scene for quite some time now. Will, maybe if you could just give us a little bit of a Cliff's Notes of just the board scene and how it's evolved over the past, I mean, really handful of years, maybe a decade or so.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really an extension of where kind of the roots of kind of what I would consider climbing training, or sort of the earliest examples of using things that aren't actually going climbing to train for climbing, from the campus board to system boards to with like spray walls, like some of the original hangboards. I think even at least in the US, Rob Candelario, like I think just like drilled out part of the like butcher block chopping board, like, you know, so climbers have just been really creative with figuring that out forever. And
Right.
I see kind of what we're doing is just it's an extension of that sort of built on all those other things as they've come about. And certainly, like, you have the Moon board as the first sort of standardized, kind of commercially available wall. And then someone came in and added the LED kit. And then the TB1 was the second commercially available LED board. And so when the TB1 came out, I'd really designed that specifically to be like more of a workout apparatus. I often tell people it's like a squat rack for climbers. It was never really meant to be like a fun bouldering wall where you do boulder problems. It was meant to kind of house exercises that looked a lot like climbing.
Right.
But the design of that was pretty rudimentary when it came to the holds, especially. We just kind of were using what we had access to at the time. But as kind of the development of that continued into the TB2, you know, more tools became at our disposal. I learned a handful of other skills along the way that I was able to apply to that, and the team at Tension grew, and so we were able to build in more expertise, and we really took our time with it. And the TB2 is designed to be like a bouldering wall, to house as many different kind of styles and techniques. We were really just trying to max out what a flat adjustable wall can do, because at the end of the day, it is still a flat piece of plywood. I listened to your episode with Carlo, and I thought it was amazing. And he mentions something similar to that also, where it is limited in that way for sure. But what we tried to do with the whole designs and the designs of the feet is to try and fake as much of the dimension as we could, and try and add as much nuance as we could kind of squeeze out of it.
Well, I appreciate the thought that was put into it, and having spent some time on the TB2 recently, there are such a variety of holds there, and the feet, there's a lot of movement that can be had. I mean, that's one of the things that jumped out of my mind, having predominantly climbed on a moon board, because that's the only board that's in my town here at my gym. There's a 2016, and then they changed it to the 2019, and it's hard for me. It's fixed at 40 degrees, and it starts at V3 that still feels like V4, and so it's kind of hard to move on, but it's a very specific style. And then when I hopped on the TB2, I felt there was just a lot more climbing kind of involved. I wasn't just like hucking from hold to hold, but I was actually like, oh, I'm twisting my hips here, I'm stepping through. There's a lot of movement, which I thought was really cool, and there are some big holds on there that you could grab a heel hook on, and those big fat pinches that you can flip a hand on. So the kind of the thought and the variety that you put into that, I think, is quite well executed, and we can get into a little bit more of that in a second here. But Michael, I'd like to get your thoughts as well, just on kind of the evolution of board community. You make a lot of films for Tension, you're out there with the board lords, and there's moon communities, there's kilter communities, and I don't think it's not like we're gangs. I mean, people climb on all different kinds of boards depending on what their gym has, and if you're lucky enough to have a gym that has multiple boards, then that's even better. But, you spoke a little bit about this, when you were talking about kind of, do you spend a whole day to get out to the crag, or can you just get a session in and feel fulfilled like you've been climbing? And I think a lot of that has to do with this ability now to tap into other climbers who might not be in the same state or country as you, for that matter. So talk to me about kind of board culture and where you see it going from here.
Yeah, man. I mean, when I got into it, it was, very small. I mean, Moon brought this idea to market, credit where credit's due. Like I was obsessed with that thing, the Moon board in the beginning. And I think that, so for me, what I would do in the beginning, there was no LEDs when I was first climbing on a moon board. The connection was not app-based, it was web-based. You had to look up the climbs on the website, and the gyms that had the moon board, they would have like a binder.
Right.
So it was a little different, but what was cool about it then is that you could, it was a little bit clunkier, but you could upload your videos still to the website, and in that way it was kind of connected. But yeah, there were when in the beginning, when I started, there were people who I just learned about them, and I through the moon board, and would try to keep up with these, like what these guys were putting out and whatnot. But taking that to now, it's this whole other thing. Like, I mean, social media is a whole nother thing. Like, if, we're all in these different channels now, and it's showing, board culture is showing up there, right?
Right.
I just think that what's really cool about it, and where it's come, like, and this gives an indication of, I think, how important it is to a lot of people, right? When you go on Instagram, there are a ton of just board accounts.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anybody thinks that these board accounts are going to be like super popular, or like they're going to be these, things that they just rack up a bunch of followers with, and are, I don't really think it's about that. It's more about like sort of just another avenue and another way to share what's going on. And I just think that, I think we should pay attention to that, because I think it's an indication of just how important it is and where it's going to go. I think that hopefully, and this is something that I've thought about from time to time, is like, I want there to be like, ADAs.NUs for boards specifically, right? Like, Will and I talk all the time about, like, we kind of look at boards and board culture like bouldering was looked at in the 90s. Like, it wasn't really taken very seriously. We talk about it all the time. Like, it wasn't really taken very seriously. I mean, most new things aren't taken very seriously. But I think board culture, and the way that it's going, like, I really see it being cemented as its own thing and its own subcategory, if you will, in the future. Some people might laugh at me. I don't care. That's just what we think. We're nerds about it. But yeah, I just from where I started with going online, getting these things and posting my videos, to now like having it in an app, and noticing just how many people are like creating these accounts and these, avenues for sharing their experience. Like, I just see that getting more and more popular, and I just think it's going to be sort of just a growing subculture that's going to be harder to ignore. So
I think so too, man. I do. I think so too. I just from the many of the interviews that I've done on here with professional elite level, climbers that are crushing and pushing the limits out on rock, the amount of time that they spend training on boards and posting those videos and using them as a tool to try to replicate certain moves. There's just a lot going for it. And then of course, just, going to the extreme and looking at like true kind of board culture. I've not too long ago sessioned with Ravioli Biceps, who of course is, done a lot to build culture and community around the moonboard community. We actually happened to be sessioning on a TB2 though. I got to go to his garage and I sessioned on the 2024 moonboard. He had the only one in North America at the time, and we got to session on that. It was really awesome. And the next day we met up with some, Honnold and Segrist and, it was just like the craziest. And we had a session on a TB2 and it was just wild to kind of dip into that world for a second. Obviously I was well out of my league there, but the psych that's around board climbing, especially when there's a group, like if I'm having a session with some buddies here in Louisville, it's the same feeling as being out at the crag to some extent. I mean, like the Stoke and the Send Train kind of vibes that happen when people are like just, ticking projects and you're helping one another. And, it doesn't feel artificial, I guess, is kind of the point there. And for a lot of people who are shift workers or, can't get to a big commercial gym, they've got something in their basement, that allows you to connect with others as well. And that's one thing I really liked about the TB2 app, by the way, I'll shout that out, is, every one of those problems has a little Instagram icon on the top, and you can take a look at it for beta, but you can also like feel like you're connected to these people when you're working on a climb that they were working on. And I found that super valuable and enjoyable as I was diving in.
Yeah, man. It's a way to find. I've noticed that because Will and I have a board account. Honestly, like a lot of us at Tension have a board account, and we're probably more active on that than anything. But yeah, the app has kind of helped me connect with the people who are in the app externally, like in Instagram, and like add board accounts. So it is that extra way to find the people who are doing the same things as you. But one thing I wanted to add about the other like side of boards and why I think they're very addictive and there's a culture growing around them is like kind of what we started with talking about. Like you could just get such a good workout in and feel like your time is spent just better being at a board, right? Like if you're in a crag, like you got to think about all the time that you're projecting and or walking to another spot or driving to get out there, right? And so when you think about the amount of time that goes into going outside and then you think about all that you can get out of a board from that same amount of time, it's kind of hard to not pick the board sometimes. So I think, again, that's like another thing that it's why it's growing and why people are, spending more time on boards.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm getting more and more psyched on it. And I think maybe one of the ways that we can find our way through this conversation is by maybe breaking a few of these sections into kind of beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and talking about where you all see, and we'll speak most specifically about the TB2 here, because this is a board that you've been working on for many years and fairly new to the market, very thoughtfully designed. We can talk about some of those attributes here. I'm going to post some videos of me climbing on it. It's very cool of you guys to bring this full pro clinic to all listeners free of charge here. So we have an opportunity to really geek out. And kind of the two things that are most present on my mind as I look at training on boards is, one, the time savings is huge. I've got kids, I've got jobs, and the Red River Gorge is 2 hours away. So if I can hit a training stimulus in a far shorter amount of time that will transfer over to my climbing when I am able to take those days off, that's highly valuable to me. And then on the other side, I'm mostly an endurance climber. I'm mostly a route climber. I will take some bouldering trips from time to time. I'll hit the craft boulders, get out to Leavenworth, and I really enjoy it. But I don't know, for me, just like what kind of floats my boat is being on a rope. And I'm curious, through your all sense, how I might best and most effectively use the TB2 in my goals, in achieving my goals at the Red River Gorge, or for any, route climber that's out there. So those are kind of like the main pillars that I'd like to peel back this conversation on. And maybe the best place to start here will be to look at a beginner, if you will. And this could be somebody who's not necessarily, this is their first time in the gym, but a beginner to boards. And they might have walked by a tension board or a moon board or a kilter or whatever at their gym a million times and just gone over to the set problems. And I'd love your thoughts on how people like that, people who were me not too long ago, maybe a year ago or so, it was like the first time I started really training on a board, how we should look at our early sessions on a TB2.
Well, I want to pull out one of the things you said there. I think is super important about the kind of the time savings. And I sort of look at that as accessibility. Like boards are just more accessible than going outside for the vast majority of people. You know, we're lucky enough to live in Colorado. You've got the Red River Gorge 2 hours away, which seems far, but it's also, that's not far at all. So you get to go to the Ret. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah. If you live in Florida, it's a totally different story.
Totally. So there's a lot of people who this boards can kind of be their connection to the larger climbing world if they don't live near a destination or something like that. So that's something that I think's cool and is definitely something that's important to me. I used to live in Maryland, and even then, like, you know, the New River Gorge is 6 hours away, which is great and really not that far. Like, you can still go, but it is far. And so I kind of felt in a lot of ways like kind of disconnected and seeing all the photos of cool rock climbing going on, but then not really having access to that. And there's like a disconnect there. And for me, like the gym culture and kind of the connection and accessibility that you can have in climbing through those avenues is really neat. And it's something that's just available to more people. And anyway, I think that's cool. But for a beginner, I think the terminology is important too. Like a lot of folks talk about training on boards, and training, at least for me, the way that I kind of have heard training defined and how I define it in my head, training is like there's a time scale and a goal involved. And training is like a series of workouts over time. And the idea is that those workouts are kind of compounding and everything's sort of leading to a goal. And it's all very specific. And then workouts are kind of the sub-segment of that. But you can also just go climbing. You can also just climb on a board and have a good time and just kind of explore and do what seems cool to you and all of that. And I think for beginners, that's really where I would start. Like if you've not really climbed on a board at all, don't feel like you need to be quote unquote training or doing anything specific. Like just go over there and have fun. It's fun. Move the wall around, try it at different angles, try a bunch of different problems, try and find, like if you walk up to the wall and you think a hold's really cool, find a climb that has that hold and just kind of explore it and get a feel for it. Cause it's kind of its own, as we've been talking about, you know, we talk about board style too. And I think that board style's been traditionally thought of as this like really kind of like raw jump and snatch style. But it really encompasses more than that. To me, board style just has to do with the fact that it's restricted to really one plane for the most part. But there's just a ton of movement and variety and technique and just all sorts of things to explore, even just on that flat plane. And it's often a really nice complement to what's set in a gym. Gym climbing, especially kind of modern gym climbing, revolves a lot more around really big forms and featured walls and volumes and stuff, which is amazing. And like, that's where you're going to learn those skills. But the boards can be a really good complement to learn that sort of more, I don't really even know how to describe it, but kind of traditional or raw style. Like when a lot of people think about bouldering, they think about like a steep, flat wall.
Right.
And so it really kind of embodies that.
I think it will be interesting to see, you know, even kind of the further evolution of boards and how the influence of modern gym setting and competitive climb settings starts to bleed its way into boards. And maybe that's one of the areas we can start to wrap up the conversation later on is, you know, what are the wild ideas for what comes next? But in terms of the TB2, at least my experience on it, and I've had a few sessions, is that there's enough holds and both footholds and handholds that I could comfortably grab if I wanted to kind of have an easy circuit session or if I wanted something more challenging. And that is kind of what stood out maybe first and foremost for me as a beginner, first hopping on the TB2, was my delight that there were enough variety of holds there that I could have a fun session without like going to the death. And Michael, maybe you could talk me through a little bit about like the thought that went into of quite densely packed spray wall, if you will, mirrored, and we should talk about that aspect as well, at least the one that I was on, but also like they're not all like heinous holds, there's like stuff that I could like have fun on. So I think that's maybe important for the beginner to understand as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, let me just speak on like a broad, so like Will was kind of touching on like beginners, I think, don't need to worry so much maybe about training as they do sort of climbing on the board and learning the board, because boards in themselves are just, because there's so many different ones and they're not all the same and they all have a learning curve to them. Like, so I think broadly speaking, like just to kind of reiterate what Will was saying, like learning the holds, like taking time to just look at all the nuances of all the holds, like understanding, because like on the TB2, we have a lot of holds that we consider like hybrid holds. So you can, depending on the angle you approach them, you can kind of use them in different ways.
Sure.
Right. So just taking your time and playing around with learning those holds and just understanding how like they can be used and all of that. Also just playing with the angle, like that's a big deal. Not all boards have the ability to angle change, but the ones that do, you're going to be able to kind of approach them a little bit more, because you can literally just put that thing to vert to where most all of the holds you can somewhat interact with, whether it be with your feet or your hands. But I think it's just a good rule of thumb, like when you're approaching board climbing, to play around with the angle. And specifically on the TB2, like, what you're talking about with the holds, we use the term spectrum of difficulty a lot when we're talking about the board and we're telling people about the board. So some boards out there are harder to approach than others. Some are easier to approach than others. But when we were developing the TB2, we noticed that there were a lot of holes in these systems that were currently available. There are, just speaking objectively, like on a kilter board, if you look at it, like the holds are typically easy to intermediate. Like if you put everything sort of on a flat plane, you're working with easy to intermediate holds, which is good for accessibility. It's good for people to be able to approach and climb on and get sort of the board feeling. But being that the holds themselves don't really go past an intermediate level, if you will, it's you kind of have to lean on the adjustability to create that difficulty and produce a narrow way of getting better, if you will.
Right. So like in essence, it would be hard to set a V double digit boulder at 10 degrees on a kilter board compared to maybe a TB2 where not all you could choose some specifically hard holds, even if it's at a low angle. Yeah,
and again, I don't want any of this to sound like we're shit talking anybody, because I think there's a place for everything. Every one of these has its own unique experience and all of that. But this is
totally
objectively, these are the things that we looked at when we were developing the TB2. So, but yes, what I'm saying is if you blanket a board with only easy to intermediate holds, then it leans on the difficulty has to come out of somewhere. And so it usually has to be really steep to produce difficulty, or you have to go a specific distance between the holds to produce difficulty. But, generally speaking, that it kind of produces a narrow way of progression, or narrow avenues for progression in that way. On the other side of it, like if you look at a moon board, it's difficult to access that board because it's not adjustable. Typically it is at 40 degrees. And so all of the difficulty is kind of slammed into the holds. And what we noticed on a moon board is that the moon board is typically intermediate to hard holds, meaning that when it's locked at a specific angle and it's just got intermediate to hard holds, there's a high accessibility bar there, right?
Sure.
So in getting to what you asked in the first place, what we put into the TB2 is this spectrum of difficulty. So we basically put 4 levels of difficulty in the hands themselves. So in other words, there's easy holds, there's intermediate holds, there's a category that's like a third category, we call advanced, and then we have hard. And again, these are all sort of looked at on a flat plane, just sort of, graded in that way. And we have just this spectrum of difficulty that is baked into the board. So when you're approaching, as a beginner, it's good to learn all of these holds and play with the angle. Like put the thing up to as vert as you want, just to be able to sort of weight specific feet, use specific hands that even at 10 degrees might seem like way out of your league. Like use the angle to explore the different, movement possibilities and hand possibilities and even foot possibilities, right? Like, again, we do have a lot of feet and we can talk about that more, but there's also a spectrum of difficulty in the feet. And so spending time just like learning, sort of just stepping on all of them and learning how much you can get away with before you pop off, or, just all of those nuances, I think are kind of what training looks like for a beginner on a board. Again, I don't think it's training. It's just sort of learning the board, using the angle and all of that. So
yeah. And that's kind of my first session on it was very much that. Essentially was just climbing around and feeling the different, this is a pinch that I could flip, or, oh man, that foot down there is garbage for me. Like I'll have to figure out something else. So really just kind of playing around, because it is densely packed. And the one that I was on, actually, I've climbed on 2 different tension board 2s, and both of those were mirrored. And Will, maybe I could have you speak to kind of the thought process behind mirroring, but I think I'm also aware that there is a setting for the TB2 that is spray wall unmirrored as well, right? So if you could, let's speak to that. That should probably set the foundation for where we're at, and then we can now, after that, shift into some like methodologies and application.
Yeah, so I really like the mirror. When I was originally using adjustable walls and kind of starting to set them, like kind of end of high school, early college, I was using them specifically as I was coaching. And so I had like clients and like a team and stuff and I really built those layouts to use to teach climbing and also to use as a training tool, and being able to do things both directions is really nice, both from a training stimulus standpoint, but also movement learning. There are a lot of fun little exercises you can do with the mirror. And it's also nice for identifying any sort of issues a climber might have, like one side or another. It's a great way to, you can kind of both, you can sort of train to not get hurt, but if you are hurt, you can kind of avoid the injured area. And at the same time, you can also focus on that area in a specific way to kind of rehab things. So I find a lot of utility personally out of the mirror, but ultimately what happens with a mirror board, and especially when you go down to that 8-foot width, is you can kind of feel the mirror. And some people don't like that. And technically there are less like possible movements available. The board's so dense that the reality of you being like, I ran out of things to do is not really real, but right. Some people just don't like that feeling, which is legit, like totally fine. And so what we tried to do with the spray layout, we wanted to have both options, because the mirroring, especially when we first came out with it, it was like pretty polarizing. Some people were like, what do you do? Like, that's stupid. It's totally fine. Like, whatever. So I wanted to have both, but also really wanted to make them feel like very different boards. Like I wanted it to be 2 products. So the spray layout is, in some ways, it's a little harder. The bigger holds are more towards the edge, and the hold orientations are a little bit more extreme. Where on the mirror, they're like, I went to the mirror one with more of like thinking about, like, I want to teach people how to climb. And so it's a lot of really kind of what I would consider foundational movements, patterns, positions, hold types, orientations, like all of that stuff. Really tried to bake that in there to make it as useful as possible for that kind of a use case. And then with the spray, really trying to make something that felt like there were just a ton of possibilities and things that were maybe in a little bit weirder of a spot where you'd have to be a little bit more creative with how you're kind of moving through different holds or linking sections of the board. So they climb very differently. If you get a chance to climb on the spray, I think you'll feel it. A lot of the stuff that we're we're talking about right now and have talked about in the past probably just sounds like a bunch of nerd shit, and it is, but like when you climb on it, you feel it. You don't have to like listen to us talk all this nonsense, and like when you get on the board, this stuff, you'll get it.
Yeah. Well, I did get, it's interesting. You know, I hopping on the TV2 that was mirrored, I pulled up, I was like a V4 or V5. I'll share a video of it, but I did it mirrored, and on one side I could do it, and on the other side I couldn't do it. And that was like pretty eye-opening to me, because what surprised me was that the side that I couldn't do it, I would have considered my stronger side, but I'm looking at like the side-by-side video, and like my hips weren't engaged in the same way as the other side. I wasn't pulling in with my toes. I've got a little bit of a lumbrical tweak in my right hand, and there's kind of like a 3-finger drag, like crux holding it. And so like, I don't know, I just expected to perform better on the one side. So A, I was surprised, and B, like it just kind of, I'm not sure what I do with that information. Maybe you can help me, but you know, like I did it, and I flashed on the left side, and I couldn't complete it on the right side. And I guess that tells me that there's some weakness or some movement inefficiencies or something that's happening. But then what do I do from there? What do I do from there?
Well, I think just the fact that you are even asking any of those questions, that's the point of it. Like just that cognitive dissonance of like, oh, I did it on one side and I didn't do it on the other, produces this line of questioning individually that I think that's actually the value. The questioning is the value, not necessarily the like, what do I do with it? But the fact that you're thinking about like, oh, well, like I thought this was my strong side. Why do you think it's your strong side? And then, oh, my hips were more engaged on this. Just having to go down that rabbit hole and looking at the two different videos and be like, what's different here? Why did it work on this side? Why didn't it work on this side? Those are all the questions you should be asking all the time when you don't do a move. Like, why didn't I do it? Did my hand come off? Did my foot come off? Was I weighting the foot properly? Where were my hips? And so I think just the simple act of engaging with this idea of mirrored boulders starts to produce a line of questioning in somebody that, like, that's actually the fruitful thing. What you should do with that is just keep asking those questions, keep trying boulders on different sides, keep trying to figure that out. Because it's nothing that I can sit here and be like, oh, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I can't tell you that. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. And at the end of the day, the more valuable thing than having somebody come in and just try and tell you exactly what to do is kind of giving you an opportunity to start to learn to unpack that yourself and utilize that information yourself and do that kind of self-assessment and try and make those tweaks to the way that you're doing a move on purpose. And just exploring that, I think, is, to me, has always been the foundation of climbing, is that exploration aspect. Because even if you do something wrong, and you don't do the move, you're learning something. You're learning something about, like, well, maybe that didn't work for this move, but it was a creative idea. File that away later. Maybe it'll come into play on another boulder or on a sport climber, whatever anyone's working on. But just that questioning, the curiosity, the exploration, I find that the mirror just brings that out because it begs the comparison from side to side.
Yeah. It was pretty fascinating. I did a handful of climbs where there's just like this set of arrows at the top of the app. And so, for those who are listening who haven't been on it yet, you pull up a climb, you can, sort by grade or by angle or any number of combinations. You could, select a route with a specific hold that you want to work on. And then you do it, and then you just like tap the arrows and it'll just mirror it. It'll just flip it to the other side. And my expectation, and actually this played out on some of the others that I did, was that I would learn certain things doing it on the first go, on the first side, that then I could apply, even though it wasn't the same. It was the opposite body part, but I kind of like inherently had a little bit of beta already going into it. Like, oh, I know how that hold feels, or I know I need to kind of pull in a little bit with this. The one time I wasn't able to do it. On others, I was able to do both. And so I found it a pretty fascinating exercise. In terms of kind of using that feature, is it recommended to to try to do, each problem on both sides kind of back to back like that? Or are there other ways to use the mirror feature that I maybe wasn't considering?
So there's a certain level at which the side-to-side ability really starts to diverge, and anyone who's climbed on one of these mirrored boards has probably experienced this. And so I think there's kind of a sweet spot when you're talking about kind of skill acquisition, the skill acquisition part of it. If it's too easy, you're just going to be able to do it on both sides, even if you don't do it super well either way.
Right.
And then if it's like really, really hard, it might just be so far kind of outside of your comfort zone that you're so not able to do it that you are also just kind of banging your head against the wall and not really learning anything. But finding that sweet spot is really helpful with that, where you can do it on one side and you kind of just can't do it on the other side. I find that's really kind of the most fertile ground for like trying to actually do that self-assessment and learning. But there's a lot of cool exercises you can do. One of my favorites that I tell everybody is, find something that's relatively hard for you near your limit and work on it until you send it. And don't try the mirror at all. Wait, and then try and do it first try on the mirror, or within, as quickly as you can. Because as you said, you know the beta sort of,
right?
But you haven't actually done those moves that direction. So it's a good exercise just in kind of execution, because you know exactly what to do, but can you actually do it? So that's a fun little kind of execution, almost mental training side. But it's also really helpful if you're doing a more strength oriented workout, or whatever it is you're targeting. But just being able to do them on both sides, I think, is low hanging fruit for a lot of folks. Like if you're having trouble with a specific kind of lock off, and you can make a bunch of similar lock offs and do like sets and reps repeating on both sides, and you can tailor the difficulty exactly where you want it, or try and get the target angle near your project that has the lock off. That's the reason you're training lock offs in the first place. So the ability to get really targeted, but then also balance that out. So you're not just training for that one specific left arm move. You're just training yourself to be able to do those kinds of moves better in general.
Yeah, cool. I definitely felt that when I was playing around on it, and I could see the value of going down that rabbit hole a little bit more, and especially just becoming a technically more aware and proficient climber with how we move our bodies, and not always favor like the direction or the holds that are easiest, but in fact kind of push ourselves out of that comfort zone. So I think that's super sound advice there. And I think this kind of moves us into the intermediate section here, which we can kind of maybe combine intermediate and advanced, because I do want to shift and talk a little bit about sport climbing and how one could train on the TB2 for routes. But if we're looking at kind of intermediate and advanced, and we're getting into harder level projecting and maybe playing around with the angle and trying to find a problem or set a problem that is out of reach, I'm curious how you recommend to people that are interfacing predominantly with the TB2, how we can limit project most effectively on that board.
Michael's got a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah. You asked Will, like, what do I do with that when I can do one side and not the other? And,
right.
And while I appreciate the philosophical answer, I want to give you something you actually can do with it.
Oh,
so
good.
What you were saying about like doing on one side and then not being able to do it on the other. So utilizing the angle adjustability as a tool is something that I don't really think people think much about, right?
Mm.
Like people want to send a target boulder on a target angle, and they'll try it and try it and try it, and they just beat their head against the wall until they either do it or they never do it. You know what I mean? But utilizing the angle to actually train in a targeted way is massively beneficial. So when you said you could do one side and you couldn't do the other, okay, so the first thing I think you can immediately do and apply to a training, scenario is pull that thing 5 degrees back. to where it's a little less on you, or even all the way like 15 degrees back. Let's just say that, away from the target angle, right? Make it to where that move, the move that is the limiting move, make it to where you can actually do it, and yet it feels somewhat difficult. Like you can see where the difficulty is, but you need to be able to do it first to understand like what exactly you need to focus on. Because it may be a body position, it may be a way that you're angling the shoulder, like if it's a shoulder move, like it could be a number of things, but it's really hard to understand and lock onto that when it's at your limit. So pulling that thing back to a very comfortable place where you're starting to, you can do the move and you can identify what's going on in your body, under your feet, in your shoulders, in your arms, like that's key. So what you do from there is, if you can smoke it, you actively think about what's going on in your body, and then go another 5 degrees towards the target angle, right? And you're going to notice that the parts that you're identifying, it's getting harder there. Like you're going to start noticing that degree of difficulty, but because you're able to peel back that level of difficulty and really get a hyper focus, like look at what it is that's going on that's causing you to fail, every bit that you push it forward, you're able to keep that focus in your head and keep that focus in the places that are demanding it. And by the time you get back to the target angle, you may just do it, because that happens all the time, or you'll at least understand from a fundamental place like what's going wrong, and you'll be able to at least target and focus more on those areas, right? So that's something you can actively do when you identify a weakness. Utilize the angle as a tool to really understand what it is you need to focus on, and do it on easier angles, but just incrementally ratchet that thing towards the target angle. And most of the time, and people have told this all the time, because I'll tell people that and I'll be like, oh, cool, that's awesome. And then they go to do it and it blows their mind, because they don't really they never really use the angle in that way. It's always just this difficulty dial, but it is a difficulty dial in that way as well. But it's also this sort of tool to help you understand where your focus needs to be.
Let me just, if I can, just to comment on that, because I did experience that. I didn't do it in that scenario though. Like, I don't know why I didn't make that connection that you just said, because like I didn't do it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm just like, I guess it just doesn't work on that side. And just, obviously it could work on that side if I just took 10 degrees off of it, because I was pretty close to sending it. So I think, like, for whatever reason, my mind was just like in the mirror kind of world. But you're right, you can play with the angle as well. And so I think this was my third session maybe, I went and I found a V5 at 35 degrees. And that's about my limit. Like, I haven't done any V5s out in the wild. I've done, a couple on the moon board, which are probably harder. Maybe that's like a V6 equivalent or something. Yeah.
Typically, so you're good, man.
Yeah. I'm like, and I found, we can talk about grading in a little bit, but I found the grading, at least on the ones that I was trying on the TB2, to be a little bit more in line with what I would expect to kind of encounter, like on the set problems at the gym that I go to or outside. But kind of this experiment that I ran was I tried this at 35 degrees, this V5, and I couldn't do it. And so then I backed it off to a V0, and I started at V0 and I added 5 degrees every attempt. And I flashed them all the way down to the V5. I couldn't do the V5, but then having run, like, I don't know how many is that, 6 attempts or whatever it was to get it, down to back to the 35 degrees, I had learned the movement. There was muscle memory, or I had cleaned up. Like, it's even funny because, like, on my first couple attempts when the board was like nearly vertical, like, it was kind of garbage because it was so easy. I didn't have to have good footwork or anything. I was just kind of like slamming my way through it. But then as I got to like 20 degrees, 25 degrees, 30 degrees, I had really refined all the movement. And so by the time I got back to 35 degrees, I just like sent it. Like you saying, like you feel it, like we can talk about all this nerdery, but when you feel it, you feel it. Like, that was one of those things where you could just feel it. I was like, God, that was like a magic trick. It was, the experiment probably took 15 minutes, and I was back and I sent it. And I think had I just left it at 35 degrees and just kept trying it, it probably would have come together, but it probably would have taken a much bigger toll on my body than had I just kind of backed it off and eased back into it, which is a really cool way, I think, to look at problems. And is that often how people then will take on a limit? Hey, I want to send my first V10 or I want to send my first V6. Like, what are the pros and cons, I guess, of if you go out to nature, you can't back it off, right? And so in some respect, you kind of do need to learn how to project at a set angle. But there's this like pretty rad hack that you can do here by taking 10 degrees off. So I don't know, philosophically speaking, where do you guys land on that angle adjustment?
I mean, they're both good, right? Like you said, you can't just go out and tip the boulder.
Like if I can make Burden of Dreams about 5 degrees.
It'd be kind of sick, but no. So this is just like another distinction I kind of like to make is this idea of like practice and performance or training and like going climbing or however you want to split those two things up and whatever you want to call them. Like there's, at least to me, there's this avenue where we're really just, it's not about doing the thing necessarily. We're just trying to learn about how we move. We're trying to learn like different movements, increase strength, like, you get what I'm saying? Like in that context, moving the angle is really helpful. And everything you're learning while you do that, you're going to be able to apply across a broad spectrum of different goals. And so the purpose of that is to have that learning occur and have it occur in such a way that it's going to be applicable to a large range of things that you might then experience when you're trying to perform.
Yeah.
You also need to practice performance, if that makes sense. Sounds kind of silly, but like the ability to actually execute and perform at your limit is a skill in itself. And so making sure that that's also represented in what you're exposing yourself to. Sometimes you need to learn different kind of tactical skills in order to work out how to do something really difficult at your limit and not be able to adjust the angle. And there's a whole skill set and kind of tactical decision making around how to go about doing that as well. And so you end up needing both things really. Like if you want to perform at your goals, you need to practice performance. You need to like understand how to apply everything that you're gaining in your training or your practice or whatever, and be able to utilize that on your projects. But really being able to, you can't really escape the fact that both of those things are important.
I can see the utility in both of those. And I agree. I think it's a nuanced distinction, but there's a distinction between like using it as a tool to get stronger, more technically proficient, and using it as a tool to practice performance. And so, maybe my last kind of question around these, and I'm going to shift into my comfortable waters of 85-foot routes here at the Red River Gorge. But I have a hard time, like, kind of like immediately tapping into that try hard, just that like, like immediate dump all the power into 3 moves. And it likely because I, started climbing as a multi-pitch trad climber and then, like slab, granite, jamming, these kinds of things out west. And then I came to the Red River Gorge, which of course is much steeper, but it's still very much known for like the biggest holds you'll fall off of. And not often, very infrequently, are you kind of like going 100%. But on a board where there's only a handful of moves or just outdoors bouldering, you really kind of have to like recruit that immediately. And so I'm curious if you all have any ideas or thoughts for those of us that struggle to like just dump the battery the second you pull on.
Well, I just want to add, like, I have been strictly a boulder my entire climbing career. It's embarrassing when I get on the rope, I'll just say that. But in the same way, like, I also had a hard time getting past this sort of comfortable threshold of like the extent of which I wanted to try hard. And that is a practice within itself, right? Like just going beyond what your comfort zone is as far as effort is because like once I started learning to like give it my all instead of giving what I'm comfortable with, that was when I really started breaking through and pushing that bar higher. And so when it comes to boards, like, like Will was kind of saying, like practicing both of those things, right? Like you're right. Like you cannot adjust a boulder outside or a route. You can't make it easier necessarily, but there is, let's just say you've got 2 days, 2 different days on a board, right? You got a target goal at a target angle. You can climb on that thing at different angles to sort of learn it, right? And then you can spend a different day just on execution at the target angle, right? And I think it's just important to practice sort of reaching and breaking through sort of the comfort zone of try hard. And again, that may be sort of something that is part of the intermediate to advanced as far as like levels and using a board, right? Like I think that you can have days where you practice the movement at less steep angles, and because you have the ability to do that. The board, I mean, our board is specifically made to do that for progression's sake. But then there's days that you just work on the execution. You just work on breaking or pushing that limit of try hard and that comfort zone. Granted, you don't want to push it too much and get hurt, but there's, you know what I'm saying? Like I think there is a comfort level that all of us sort of get very used to. And until you are sitting in front of the target goal, whether that be on the board or outside, and you're really giving it, you decide that you're going to give literally everything. And this is why people scream a lot. Like it kind of invokes this thing. I mean, some people overdo it, let's be real, but it does. Like when you're kind of it invokes this like primal thing and you end up screaming, right? And I never used to scream, but there are times now when you're giving your all, you gotta freaking do it. And that's really what I'm talking about as far as you got to just have those days where you're focusing on execution at 100%. Try it once, rest 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. This is like max lifts here. This is what we're thinking about, So there's days when you work with the angle, but then days where you practice execution for the sake of pushing your comfort zone and literally just practicing on giving that 100%.
Yeah.
So that was a lot, but you see what I'm saying there.
No, I totally see it. And there's definitely for me, probably more of a mental discomfort than a physical discomfort, really, to do that. It's like a biological protection mechanism that's like, well, no, just save a little bit because you got some more moves to go. And so it's I can understand your perspective there where like it's taken practice. It's taken kind of deliberate practice to say, no, I'm going to go full. I'm going to go 100 on every one of these moves. And Will, I'll toss the same question to you to see if you've got any thoughts or hacks for those of us who find it a little bit uncomfortable to pull on and just like give it everything for 5 moves.
I'll kind of speak to it on the sport climbing level. It's funny you mentioned sort of your entry from multi-pitch trad and into sport climbing, and I had a somewhat similar entry point to climbing. Was originally like a gym kid, and then multi-pitch trad, then sport, and then most recently bouldering.
Oh, no kidding.
And one of the things that I like the most about sport climbing, and to some extent this happens on longer boulder problems, but not usually to the same level on sport climbing, but with sport climbing, there's so much tactical decision making on route, where with bouldering a lot of the time, like you kind of just pull on and dump the whole thing the whole time. Like there's no
right.
And often the moves are all so hard. It's like there's no decision to make. You either just do the move in the next one or you don't. But with sport climbing, at least for me, there's always this, you're trying to build efficiency throughout this really long period of time over a lot of moves, and thinking about, what parts of your body are recovering or being taxed and to what extent over what sections, and like, where do I need this extra 10%? And then where can I save it? That's like a really fun exercise, like a really fun kind of problem solving thing to do.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you don't have the capacity to execute on those kind of tactical decisions that you're making, they're sort of irrelevant. So like one of my favorite things about like experiences in sport climbing is this sort of metering of your like arousal level in a physiological sense. When you're resting, you really want to like kind of bring it down, calm down, don't over grip. And then you enter a bouldering section and you just have to get just feral for a second, and then you hit that next good hold, and then you have to turn that off.
Yeah.
in order to not like blow yourself out through the next section. And so just this constant ability to sort of adjust when and how much you're giving it is, to me, that's something that really typifies sport climbing. And if you don't know how to flip that switch on and flip that switch off, then you can't make decisions about when and if you're going to do that. You're just sort of at the whim of what happens to you on the wall.
Right.
And so I think that, bouldering is a cool thing about bouldering is it's really kind of this distillation of climbing. Like those same moves exist on sport climbs, trad climbs, big alpine routes. It's just climbing, right? It's, in many ways, it's all the same thing. It's all the same moves. And so what bouldering allows us to do, and then, board climbing being a sort of even almost, you could consider it more of a distillation of bouldering, sort of more abstract. You can really focus on these things because there's less to focus on. So you can focus more directly on one individual thing. And
Right.
one of those things is being able to flip that switch. And like Michael said, taking sessions where that's the focus and line up a bunch of boulders where the first move's real. And there is no, there's no moves, there's no situations where you're chilling and you just have to get on and rip. But then also, for sport climbing, hit the finish, grab the jug next to the finish or whatever, try and shake out, calm down immediately as quickly as possible until you're like back in that zone, and then let yourself hop off the wall can be a valuable thing. But learning to kind of manage where you're at is I think pretty key to like performance in general and in particular sport climbing.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I mean, Jonathan Siegrist comes to mind when you just talk about that, like ability to like go 100% and then hit a good hold and just like, okay, let me just bring it down here. And I got to see him on the TB2, and I mean, the dude can also just dial in and go 100% from the first move. So, he's put in the hours as a climber, both on super hard cruxes in the middle of sport climbs to super hard boulders just of their own right, and to plenty of times on his spray wall in his garage and the other boards that are around the Vegas area. So I learned a lot just by watching him for that day. And it's definitely, I think, a learned skill. I love that tip there just at the end, which is a nice segue into now how can we use this TB2 to prepare for sport climbs. And for me, we're mostly talking about like long routes at the Red. And, you said just, you can do a boulder and you can get to the top, pop over to a jug and try to bring that heart rate down, try to bring that recovery, feel the pump go away, and then hop off. And it's just giving you that opportunity to like not just match it and jump down and recover on the mat, but actually recover on the wall for a little bit. Love that. 100% going to implement that into my next session. But then you guys also have these other tools. Michael, you sent me like a circuit that you kind of built for me as I'm working on my my mega proj here, the 13A out at the Red called the Force. You'd asked me for a little breakdown of like, okay, kind of break it down in sections of boulders. And man, that was an interesting exercise for me too, because then I was looking at it, I was like, God damn, this is hard. And then you sent me this, this kind of playlist that you worked up for me, and I was like, holy shit, this looks really hard. So I've got some work ahead of me, but I am curious because I've talked to some climbers on the show here. Michaela Kirsch comes to mind when she was training for La Rambla, super famous 515, of course. She did a lot of her training on a board where she was running, 40 to 50 move circuits. And I don't know if she was just kind of lapping them like a spray wall or if she was actually setting specific, trying to replicate specific sections of the climb. But it's certainly possible to do. You sent me some ideas, and I did a session already where I just pulled up. You can filter in the app for sport climbs. So like I pulled one up. I don't know if I spend as much time on that. I'd like to do some more sessions in the future on the board with kind of like sport routes in mind. So, maybe you could just give me a quick overview of like how you all have thought about the sport climber as it relates to training on a TB2, and then we can try to get into some specifics.
Yeah, generally like an easy way to utilize our board specifically is you can build playlists or circuits of climbs, right, in a specific order that could potentially mimic what it is you're trying to project for, right? So when you told me the grade breakdown and all of that of like, well, it starts with a V3, then goes into a V5, and then you have a rest, and then you have a bit of a 511. So, you can kind of try to mimic that difficulty and, even to an extent, some of the holds that you're going to utilize, right? And put them in a specific order that somewhat mimics the difficulty of a climb. And by utilizing the timer, you basically, in the app, you can select the first of those climbs in the playlist, hit the 3-button thing in the top right, and set sort of an interval timer that will automatically change the climb to the next one, right? So there's also, I don't know if you saw our Jesse Grupper episode, but Jesse had this cool little device. It was like a Bluetooth device because he did some really cool endurance circuits. But what he was doing is climbing a really hard boulder, getting to the top, like resting for a second, shaking out, and then he would down climb like a pretty difficult, but it was for him, it was kind of like an active rest down climb. And then he would click this Bluetooth button and it would swipe to the next, he had it like kind of attached to his belt or like a, pocket or whatever. And then he would click it and it would swipe to the next one where he would then be able to just go up the next boulder. So there's little devices where you can work with the timer within the app to sort of automatically swipe through the order, the boulders that you have in order to sort of create and mimic like a route. But I also want to just add talking about the different, because you've had more experience on the mirror, and there's also again the spray, and there are pros and cons and ways that each one of these sort of can produce different things. But one of the things I was thinking about the other day, if you're trying to build up like a general fitness, we'll go back to the mirror first. If you're trying to build a general fitness, you can focus on maybe some of the just generalized things that you're having trouble with for a target goal. And you can build a playlist where it goes from one side to the next, and you can kind of pick, whereas instead of picking 8 different boulders, you can pick 4 different boulders and get both sides of that to where you're doing both sides back to back, and then it goes to the next boulder and you do both sides. And that can build sort of a general, fitness in that way. On the other side with the spray, because the spray sort of thing about spray layouts is they produce a lot of possibilities and a lot more you can replicate a lot easier typically on a spray layout. What you can do there is build something that really closely mimics what it is you're doing. So whereas you can do more of a general, both sides workout on the mirror, you can actually build like a really close replica on the spray. And again, just in the same way, you can use that timer, that interval timer, to just go through boulders that you build yourself that as closely as you can mimic the target route that you're trying to do. So there's a lot that you can do there that's built into the app that is specific for building endurance and specific for sport climbers. So we didn't forget about y'all.
No, I find that, and again, this is just coming very specifically through my lens, but I find that to be the most exciting aspect of the TB2. When I was playing around, and then when you sent me that playlist, it just mentally something clicked where I was like, oh man, if I can link these boulder problems together, obviously I still need to get out to the project and apply it, as we talked about at the start of this conversation, but I've already put a season on the project. I know how it moves. I know how it feels. I know where the sharp edges are. I know where my breathing goes. But I need to build route-specific fitness. And if I can save 7 hours by trying to do that through some playlists on a board, as opposed to driving to the red in suboptimal conditions to bolt to bolt and all that, I mean, that's highly, highly appealing for somebody like me that's quite busy. And I also think it's really just kind of a fun mental exercise to go through and try and set your own cruxes. To really try to understand, okay, what is this movement? And then try it and be like, oh, that didn't feel right. Really, kind of becoming your own route setter for the route that you're trying. I think it's really rad. And, one thing I noticed too, and I'm not sure, maybe it's just because I'm not as familiar with the app since I'm a new user here, was that when you sent me that playlist, it was a variety of boulder problems that broke down kind of the route at which I communicated it you to. But there's also this feature in there where you can filter for routes versus boulders. And so if you turn off the boulder feature, it'll just filter for routes, and those come up, and you set the pace and all that, but it's not listed as separate boulders. I think they're basically just routes. And so what's the difference between kind of a playlist of boulders that link together versus a route?
So the route is more like a game of Snake. Like as you climb, the previous holds that you were on, the LEDs will turn off and the next couple will turn on. And often those take some type of circular pattern. And that's a way of, the wall is only 12 foot tall max. So there's only so long just doing a boulder problem you can make it before it would start to become contrived or whatever. So that's how you can get, you can program yourself a 40 move circuit, 50 move circuit.
Got it.
25 moves, whatever. So you can really build your route for the most part.
For those who do have the app, is there a different place that you build a route versus where you build a boulder problem?
It's the same plus button if the route setting is able. So the setting for the routes is a little bit more difficult. You're basically kind of creating a flip book. Takes a little bit more skill to do. And so that's not a feature that's by default turned on for everybody.
Got it.
If anybody listening wants that, they can email support@auroraclimbing.com and request that feature with their username, and that's they'll get instructions about how it works, and that can get toggled on.
Cool.
But we wanted to make sure that database especially stayed quality, because it is the barrier to kind of setting well within that structure is kind of high, and it requires instruction and all of that. So
Michael, what you sent me were everybody can do. It's equipped. You hit the plus button, you set a boulder, then you create a new problem. You set that boulder, you create a new problem, set that boulder, and then you group those problems into a playlist. You set the pace, and it just goes from one to the next. And I guess the practical difference for a climber is that you're going to get to the top, and then the next boulder is going to start at the bottom. So you either will down climb like Jesse was doing if you want to stay on the wall, or you do a quick drop and then just hop right back on. It's not like you were off tension for very long, and you're just doing essentially a series of from bottom to top problems rather than like a clockwise motion around the wall.
Or with Jesse's clicker, you can switch it while you're at the top to have a set down climb and then switch it at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that clicker's pretty slick.
Yeah, that's cool.
Generally, those things, I was looking for them. I had to text him and ask him what it was, but if you look for them online, they're going to be kind of hidden they're like TikTok clickers. So in other words, like if you go to Amazon, like most of them you're going to find them, they're going to be sold to you as like a TikTok like camera clicker. So that's what they're used for, is to like be able to do selfies and stuff like that from a distance. But influence, if you will. but no, I mean, you can program them to, I think, do just like a general swipe. And so, but yeah, Ryan, I'll give you the link to the one that he sent me so that maybe you can put in the show notes, people if they want to buy it. But yeah, like you were saying, you can either hop off the wall, or just like Jesse did, Jesse didn't necessarily down climb like a jug haul, which I think for the most of us, like that's probably the best way to just stay on the wall.
Right.
But yeah, you can just kind of put like jug haul down climbs in between, the boulders that you're trying to go up, so that you're still on the wall, but you're not trying to actively do like, these crazy down climb sequences.
That's cool, man. I think this is a feature that I'm going to be playing around with a lot between now and when my, send season for me in the red, especially on this route, is kind of like November. I'll be getting out before that and training on routes out there when I can get out. But, for me to really kind of dial in, my best attempts are November. And so to be able to spend some time linking up these circuits, doing these playlists, and just tapping into those energy systems, I think it's going to be hugely valuable. And again, a high bang for the buck, because maybe you're there for an hour and you're not giving up a half day or a full day to get out to the actual project. Do you think about training on routes in that manner, similar to boulders, with regard to altering the angle? Like if the force that I'm working at is somewhere in that 20 to 25 degree angle, do you see benefits of me starting that circuit that you programmed for me, Michael, at 5 degrees or 10 degrees, and then kind of, as I'm gaining fitness over the course of the summer, starting to back it down?
Absolutely. I think that it still applies there, right? Like if you find it totally bricked at the target angle, just pull it back 10, 15 degrees. Like I think that it's just, you're going to build a foundation of understanding like what the moves are about. You'll be able to do them, but you'll be able to slowly understand where you need to put that focus in the same way that you do with boulders. So if I was going to suggest, I would say like, yeah, do that. And then if you're able to just smoke it at 15 degrees less than the target angle, put it 5 more degrees. And, you know, eventually you're going to understand like where you need to break through. Like you may get, you know, let's say 5 degrees less than the target. You may get to a point where like you almost can do it, but there's just this one spot where you fail. What's cool is that you then can take that boulder where you're failing and then do the similar thing, right? That similar incremental progression with the angle change. And, you know, once you like dial that in, then maybe you can add it back into working the complete route. And again, this board is built to sort of aid in like building that progression. Like if we haven't said this already, the whole mission around this board was to be the best system for building broad incremental progression. And so like all of these tools like are super valuable and we put them in there for a reason. And so yeah, like pull that thing back a little bit, learn it a little bit. If you're falling on a specific boulder that's within that route, maybe take some time on that specific boulder and do the same thing with it, learn it, and then put it back in the route, see how you do, you know?
Yeah, I'm psyched. I think there's so much potential in there for route climbers, and it just seems to be, I mean, you guys are more, you know, in touch with the community and just the world of boards in general than I am, but it seems like there's huge potential for sport climbers, for route climbers to train in this manner and build the fitness that they need to go out there. And again, Michaela spoke a lot about that. She felt like when she got out to La Rambla, she was almost ready to send. Like she was putting in huge links, you know, just arriving because of doing these circuits, you know, 50 move, 60 move circuits on a board. So I'm really excited about that. I'm grateful that you built me that playlist. I'll put some videos up, you know, and we'll show people how I'm doing here, but I'm glad I've gotten permission now to back the angle off a little bit because I'm a little out of shape at the start of the summer here. You know, I'm going to have to ease into these V5s.
I mean, the other thing is sport climbers should be bouldering.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh, no, cut. No.
You don't have to go bouldering. So that's like, you know, another nice thing about the boards. You can just boulder on the board and you know this, as your strength goes up, everything submaximally, like that just becomes less of a percentage of your max. Mm-hmm. Strength builds endurance. Endurance doesn't really build strength. And so like now's your off season, boulder. The endurance comes so fast. 2 to 6 weeks, you'll be feeling great, but it takes longer to build that top end strength. And yeah, like if the crux on your project is V5 and the hardest thing you've ever done is V5, it's going to be tough to climb a bunch and then climb V5. But if the hardest thing you've done is 7 and the crux is a 5, you got some margin there.
Yeah.
And building those margins and finding ways to kind of maximize efficiencies on route, that's the recipe for success. So you could even, as Michael was describing, how you could kind of take the angle back and make the circuit easier. You can also pull those boulder problems out and make them harder, make them steeper. Like whatever the 4 or 5 crux is in your circuit at your whatever 25, 30 degree target angle, learn to do it at 40. Then it's going to feel real easy at 25. And so really investing in the really kind of intense bouldering portion of it, like get your strength up and then get the endurance up. And to some extent you can juggle both those at the same time. But all the best sport climbers that I know, bouldering is a key part of their preparation.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is a good time year for that. To your point, if I'm not looking to have my peak fitness for another 4 months, you know, I've got
no worries.
I got plenty of time to do that. Practically speaking, just from an energy systems point of view, and then we can kind of turn towards wrapping up. I've got a few listener questions and some things that I want to toss at you guys. But on that note, Will, you're just talking about, you know, building strength will build endurance, not the case necessarily the other way around. Do you recommend on climbing on the TB2 slow with, you know, small holds, doing a lot of like static lock-offy Daniel Wood style stuff? Do you recommend big dynamic moves, maybe to some better holds, real snappy, I don't know, ravioli biceps, or, the more kind of dynamic jumpy climbers, some of the stuff that you see Carlo doing on, double clutch moves and this kind of thing. I mean, the kind of two separate energy systems that are at play there. And how do you think about working those into how you set, a day or program a week even on the board?
You should do all of it for sure. And I think one of the cool things with having the whole diversity that's on the TB2 is you can kind of do all of it on one board. You don't necessarily have to switch system to system to get one thing or the other.
Is that the same day? Is it like one day is like a slow and strong day and one day is a fast and snappy day? Or how do you try to carve that out?
It is not clear to me that differentiating those things in such a clear-cut way is actually that effective for people. This is something I feel like I could get some hate for this. We'll see. But
put it out there, man.
I find that I don't think it's very productive to fixate on that kind of stuff. Like the difference between, energy system wise, between spending 25 seconds jumping between pinches to the top of the wall versus spending, even twice that, 40 seconds slowly laddering on like a crimp climb. I don't think for the vast majority of people that their training overall is optimized enough to where that level of splitting hairs and those like incremental percentage differences of what you may or may not get out of one thing or another, like in my opinion, that stuff for the most part goes out the window the minute you are you sleeping well? Are you staying hydrated? Are you getting it? Are you eating well? Are you those are the things that make big chunks of difference. And then if you can get real deep into it and tease out all these little things, but you got to think about like how incremental the differences are that you're chasing and whether those are getting swallowed up by the kind of larger, more important parts of your program that you may or may not be executing on. Unless you have, a sports nutritionist and a cook and a psychologist, you kind of get, it's a bit hyperbole, to some extent paying attention to energy systems and having an understanding of that and structuring your training around it is a positive thing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, at least in the distinction that kind of you're making between a more dynamic style versus a more static style, I think I look at that less as energy system and more as stylistic types of bouldering or climbing. And to the extent that you have a lot of exposure and are competent at one versus the other would probably more inform which one I would recommend somebody spend more time on. If you're really good at tic-tacking on crimps and just get stopped anytime your feet have to cut on something, you should also do that tic-tac crimping, but you should place a focus on learning how to move in that way that feels uncomfortable for you, and you can flip those two things or create other categories for what you do feel like you're good or bad at. But I think the key there is just making sure that you're getting a variety of movement styles, and to the extent that you have like a very specific goal that exists outside of the board or even on the board, making sure that there's an element of specificity to that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think, as you said, I mean, the variety of holds are there, so it's just a matter of how you program it, how you use it, and just mixing it up. Try not to overthink it too much. Have some fun. We all got to have some fun in our training and our climbing. So sticking with one style over the other for too long can also just be a drag. So it's good to mix it up. Well, I think this gives us a good opportunity to kind of get into some listener questions and a few little wrap-ups here. One of the questions that came in here was quite specifically, do you guys have any hacks for board climbers that you've seen kind of make an outsized impact on how to get better specifically on board climbing? What stands out in that kind of specific world of just trying to send harder and harder on the board?
Brush the holds and wipe your feet.
Yeah. Dude, that's a slap-on thing, and it seems super obvious, but it's not. Like, you go to it's crazy. Like, we have a lot of TB2s and facilities around us, and I said this before, but I went to a facility that had a a newer board than ours, and I was like, they're going to have that fresh plastic. You know, plastic has sort of a curve of life to it. So when you get it fresh out, like you're never gonna, it's never going to feel that good.
Right.
So I went to a facility and I was thinking, yeah, maybe I can send something that's, you know, harder on our board because our holds are a little bit more worn down. It was not the case. That board was caked in chalk and foot rubber, and it was like no one was taking care of that board, brushing it the way they should. Yeah, man. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even do the things that I normally can do on our board. Like it didn't matter that it was newer. It just was not really taken care of. And therefore I was not able to execute as well as I could on our board. So if you're using the board, well, if you care about the board, you should rush. And that's just sort of a full stop statement. If you care about executing on the board, you should take care of the board, because in order for you to execute, it has to feel good. It has to not be caked in a bunch of gunk and all that. So that's a good rule of thumb. Just take care of the board if you really want to execute on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all experienced that, whether it's on set problems or just outside as well. I mean, you know, a good brushed, clean hold is going to have a heck of a lot more bite, whether it's for your feet or your fingers, than something that's just all, you know, manked up and polished. So yeah, great advice. And there's a lot of holds on the TB too. So,
Clean
you
your
know,
shoes.
get to work. Yeah, and clean the shoes. Okay, good. So we're operating on a well-maintained board. What else do you see, or what other little hacks kind of stand out in your experience for how we can improve, either breaking through a plateau or just look at different styles of movement, or maybe even off the board training that translates very well to the board?
I don't know if I have any other hacks.
It's
Just hard.
let me just
Maybe some advice for ways, but they're definitely not shortcuts. I think that's one of the things at least for me, that I like about boards relative to what I would consider my style of climbing, where like I'm like especially like bouldering on like an actual boulder where there's a lot of dimension and options and things, and I can always I can almost always find my way, and I can't hide behind that on a board. And so boards are kind of the anti-hack in a way. It's like, no, it's hard. That's the point. And just let it be hard, and just find little ways to get better and improve. And that's really, I think, where they shine a lot of the time.
Yeah. Michael, give us a hack.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, and people need to realize this. All boards are not the same. I said this before. And some boards, it is just because of the variables baked in, it is harder to break through specific, what am I trying to say?
Call it a plateau.
Call it a plateau. Okay.
Yeah.
It's harder to break through. And the reason that is because like, and I think this is why people have a hard time with that concept of like, how do I like train on a board and all this stuff? Like, honestly, like board manufacturers have not done a great job at building something that people can progress on. There are notable holes in these systems that are the reason that they climb the way they do, and also the reason it's hard to progress on them. Like the boards that are really forcing, that really don't have a lot of, you know,
If they have like a really singular style.
yes, like so. For example, if you can't adjust a board and the board doesn't have a lot of holds for you to really like, you know, get closer to the move on or whatever, and pretty much produces only like jumpy, snatchy moves, like that's a pretty binary situation. It's kind of, you either can or you can't. And if you don't have variables built in like full spectrum of hold difficulties and angle adjustability, it's just going to be harder to break through such a binary move. Like, again, this is why we built these things into the boards, because we recognize that ourselves. Like, it's just harder to really break through it. Like there's no in between. It's you can or you can't. So I think everyone needs to like understand like what these boards like have baked in order for you to sort of hack through and like get through a plateau. But some of them aren't really doing you any favors. Like there's not an easy way to break through. So I think you need to understand, like, fundamentally, like, what a board can and can't do, what's baked into the board in order for you to, utilize these variables as tools to break through. Some of them just don't have that. So just, you kind of think about what you're climbing on. And, if you can't break through on it, and the board can't adjust, and there's not a lot of holds in order for you to, like, even get halfway through the movement and practice it somehow, then it's just freaking hard, and you're just going to have to beat your head against the wall until you do it. Sure,
Right.
There's exercises that can make you get stronger at those types of things, but that's just kind of the nature of a lot of these systems, is they just have holes in them, and they weren't really built for you to incrementally progress on. They just are hard because they made them that way, and that's just what you got to deal with.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's like a tough love situation here. I do appreciate the thought that you guys put into the opportunity for progression on the TP2, because I could session on it with some of the best climbers in the world and still put in a similar level of effort, even though they weren't a similar level of climb. And so, the guys I was climbing with were working on, high single digits or double digit boulders, and I was working on, V4, V5, but we were both trying hard as shit. And, we were able to do that because of, I think, the thought that you guys put into that. That is, I think, a nice way also for me to kind of get to another question here, which is, who are the best climbers that you've seen on the TB2 and why?
well, some names that come to mind are Noah Wheeler. Also, I mean, if you look at the first Board Lords video, like, we literally brought together like some of the kings of boards, if you will. Ben Burkhalter, he is a name that isn't known as widely as some of these, but he is one of the strongest I've ever seen on a board. These guys, I mean, I know that what it typically comes down to is these guys have just an unbelievable ability to activate, like, their dead pointing is unmatched. Like, the way they can just kind of travel between holds and latch and, do that so accurately and so perfectly. These guys have just incredible amounts of body tension. Like, I know Ben Burkhalter, for example, like, I used to coach him back in the day. He just kind of always spent his time on a very slammed angle board, and the thing he just loved gravitating to was taking a hold and locking it down literally to his waist and keeping this just chain of tension between, this tiny foothold and this awful hold he's going to. Like, he just sort of gravitated towards that. And, again, I think all the best people we've ever seen on the board have obviously spent a lot of time on that terrain. So, yeah, I think Noah Wheeler, Ben Burkhalter, Zach Galla, obviously, Aiden, obviously, is really good at boards as well. But, yeah, those guys. And there's a ton of people that you had never heard of. Ben Kim, for example, that dude's an animal. There's just so many guys you've never, ever heard of, and they are some of the strongest in the world, particularly on boards. Yeah. Will, is there anybody else that comes to mind that I'm not thinking about?
I was gonna throw Kyra in there.
Oh, sure. As well, yeah.
Total beast. And I would say, I think you nailed a lot of it. And just the ability, the finger power, to get into the nerd stuff, like from just a physiology standpoint, the rate of force development in the fingers, and just how strong all those folks are in general. But I think the real key is the precision movement. Like, when you watch Kyra jump to a hold, it's she goes exactly the right amount and then hits it exactly right. Like, everything's perfect. And those are those instances where I see a lot of, it's common to see people try and execute on a move like that, and they don't do it. They're like, oh, like, I should campus board more, I need more finger strength or whatever. But when you actually watch closely the way that they're doing the move, it's all over the place. They're overshooting the hold, coming back and slamming out. Like, it's just nothing's lined up. And those are the things I really, whenever I work with a client, I harp on them so hard about that stuff, because so many people come in and they want strength to be the answer. And maybe one in person that I've seen in the last couple of years, that was actually the answer. The movement is Like if you're not moving right, you can pour more strength on that, but you're still probably not going to do it. And to the extent that like you would need to overpower a move to not have to move well, like you're not going to get much out of that. And then you're going to train so hard or overtrain or whatever, you end up getting hurt. Actually being able to do a move well creates that margin. And you really don't have to be like a crazy beast on the hangboard or cranking a bunch of one arms if you can just move well. And there's a guy, Brandon, who came and visited. Yep. Michael, you remember that? Yep. That guy can't do a one arm, I don't think. He might be, maybe he can do I don't remember. But sorry, Brandon. He's not, and I don't think he would mind me saying, he's not like that strong, but he makes it work. Like he just moves so well. He's doing some of the hardest problems on the board, but if you looked at his strength metrics, there are people who are so strong who underperform constantly.
Yeah, I think that's such a great item to note there. It's a great piece of advice too, which is just, the answer isn't always, and maybe if you talk to a lot of people, I've been working with Nate Drolet recently, and he says almost never is more strength the answer. Typically when somebody comes off, strength is important. You're going to train up strength when you're doing these things, but strength also takes a long time to train. So if you come off of something and the first thing you say is, "Oh, I'm not strong enough," well, you just lost 6 weeks because you got to go train. But if you come off and you're like, "Oh, my hip needs to turn a little bit more," well, you can correct that in 5 minutes. So I think there's a place for everything, right? We're trying to fill all these buckets, and it's a three-legged stool. There's the mental game side as well. But I do find that to be a very interesting point that you just made. And does something come to mind with regard to the TB2 where there are ways to work on that movement? So you come off, like what was Brandon doing? What does he do that's so well compared to others? Are there certain techniques that lend themselves to board climbing more, or does it just harken back to what we were talking about, where you can kind of learn things at an easier angle and start to dial it in?
I think it's more to do with almost the effort stuff that Michael was talking about, and more of a mental side of things, where if for most folks, there's a level of trying hard that's comfortable. And I find that folks oftentimes want to use an increase in strength to bring the boulder back into that comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And that's not a long-term strategy. And, for somebody like Brandon, he tries really hard, and he's also really stubborn. And if he doesn't do it, he's not just going to walk away. He's going to figure out how to do it then. And I think that really, in a lot of ways, to me, is the one of the more important parts of this concept of limit bouldering that a lot of folks talk about. And it's really just actually pushing yourself and not sort of not being like, "Oh, I can't do this boulder, swipe next." Like, no, just wait. Like, keep trying it. Keep falling off of it. Keep changing different things and trying to figure it out. Trying harder. But it's, if you just always stay in your comfort zone, you're never going to learn that. You're never going to be able to progress past that. And that's often like that when people find themselves in what they call plateaus. They often have almost all the pieces to the puzzle already in their possession. It's just a matter of actually trying harder, trying something for long enough to have that breakthrough and learn that next key thing and kind of gain that level of understanding.
I mean, one thing I'll add to that is, like, and this may be sort of a side tangent, but like boards have traditionally like not really done a great job at creating this avenue for progression in your feet, which, as you know, as foundational as footwork is, like, boards have kind of thrown that out the window. And then when we talk about this style, there's this style that we associate with boards, and it's because there's just not been a lot of thought put into feet, right? And so I think on the TB2, that again, like, that's kind of what you started with. Like, that's what you noticed right from the get-go is, and it's what most people notice right from the get-go. It's that they've got to focus on their feet a lot more than they typically do. Yeah. And oftentimes, we're just thinking about the power components of boards, but like, we built so much into this TB2 to, you know, sort of broaden what it is that you can get good at. Like, so, you know, on the TB2, like a lot of the hardest moves are in your feet. And that's the same if you think about what's going on outside. And I mean, even in techie sequences indoors, like that's often where we fail. So, you know, what we tried to do with this board is we built in that spectrum of difficulty in the feet as well, right? Like you might notice all of the footholds, like there's 11 different footholds on this system, and 8 of those footholds are multi-directional. So they're depending on the angle that you're approaching, like there's a different level of difficulty baked in just into the feet, right? Mm-hmm. So breaking through. So I want to, you know, try, as far as the TB2 is concerned, like there's more to break through there, and there's more to learn. It's not just about a power, you know, and connecting power and all of that. Like, I think that it's sort of, we created this area where you're able to focus more on the full body. And I just think that that's another area where a lot of attention can be put and breakthroughs can be had specifically on the system. And yeah, just pay more attention to your feet, and because that is oftentimes where you're failing.
Oh, I noticed it so much when I got on. Just the problems, at least that I chose, had a lot of foot moves. And typically that hasn't been my experience climbing on some other boards. You're just kind of maybe working from a bottom to top route, or you're, you know, doing some big kind of dynamic hucks and cutting feet. But here it's, you know, I might have done 2 or 3 foot moves per hand move that I was doing on some of the problems that I pulled up, which for me as a route climber, again, felt more familiar. You know, you're always kind of trying to shuffle feet around and find better, more stable positions where you could shake or just have a little bit more of a stable stance on the wall. So I liked that. And this is, you know, a perfect opportunity for us to wrap in the last question here that we'll have time for, and that's about shoes. And, you know, what's the best type of shoe to wear when climbing on a board?
I mean, man, I think it's going to be very similar to what people tell you. I mean, first of all, what you wear on your feet is totally your preference. Like, people who are heavier don't tend to like as soft a degree of shoe. Like, I am a lighter guy. I like a really soft shoe, but, you know, more people want more support. I think applying this to the TB2, like, I like to train in what I'm going to climb in outside. Like, I like a softer shoe typically. A more stiff shoe is, you're going to have, just like outside, you're going to have difficulty feeling the little nuances of, the little parts of the feet that you really have to activate on. Like, that's just harder in a stiffer shoe. You're not able to feel what's going on. So I personally like to train in softer shoes, because there's training to be had everywhere, but there's also like training in foot activation. There's like particular styles that I really gravitate to, where you are like activating a side toe like tension on a little small foot, and you have to keep that rigid activation all the way through your feet. And I could not imagine doing that in even like so I wear the Scarpa exclusively, and I couldn't imagine doing that in a Instinct, for example. I typically wear a Furia Air or a Drago. So yeah, man, I just think if depending on the terrain and the types of feet that you're using, you might want a stiffer. If you're on a vert sequence, you might want a stiffer shoe. But I think it's good to have both, because they're not you got to have a lot of arrows in your quiver, and they're not all going to work for the same thing. So just keep that in mind. It's the same on boards as it is outside.
That's great. Will, anything to add to that? What do you like to wear when you're working out on the board?
I usually choose a pretty middle of the road shoe for board climbing. When I go outside, it really more depends on rock type, and I often find myself in a slightly stiffer shoe outside than inside. But yeah, the Dragos for me are kind of my go-to soft shoe.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to try those out. I was climbing for the most part of the year in Instincts. Then I got some Instinct VSRs, which I liked, you know, was feeling a little bit more soft, a little more responsive. And then I got the Veloce lace-ups, which are softer yet. And I've been freaking loving those. Like, I don't know, I feel a little bit more athletic, a little bit more dynamic when I'm, especially like climbing indoors. I'm not quite sure. They might be a little too soft for me out on my project. I'm not quite sure yet, but I've been playing around with switching things up for a little bit here.
It's worth trying. It's fun. Shoes are a fun little rabbit hole. I trained in the Volaches for a while too, and I love the toe box, but I'm a shoe stickler, and I hate the heels on those shoes. The heel is often where a good shoe dies for me, because you get to a point like when you're pushing your limit, those little things can start to come into play more. So
yeah,
play around with it. It's fun.
Totally, it is fun, and I agree. I think it's not something that I've put a lot of thought into myself until very recently, and there is a weird like aha moment that happens when you like switch up a shoe, and all of a sudden like you're doing a move with ease when you weren't before. I mean, it's pretty wild, the impact of shoes. So yeah, appreciate that little tangent there on geeking out over shoes. Let's wrap this thing up. I want to try to understand where Tension's going from here, hopes and dreams for the TB2 with regard to, adoption, how people can maybe get them. I'd actually love to get a sense for pricing, and kind of the options that you have on that, as I've got a group of guys here in Louisville. We don't have a TB2 here in Louisville yet. And we're like, hey, like, why don't we get one and just like have our own little co-op out of one of our buddies' garages? So, it'd be nice to know kind of like the easiest thing is to walk into a gym and they've got like a mega setup, but these, you make these also for people who want to train in their basement and don't have access to a gym. So I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of, where it's at now. And if we're psyched on the TB2, how we might be able to access that on our own, and then maybe set our sights towards the future a little bit.
Yeah, I can start on that. I mean, really what we've learned with Tension is whenever you innovate around something, like there's a massive education curve that you tend to kind of have to follow it up with. It's, we've done better on some things with that than others, but, really right now, as far as the TV2 is concerned, it's been out just over a year and a half now, not very long. It's really right now what we're our goal is to get a sort of an education, a level of education out into the open around it, right? There's a bit of, there's so much that we put into this that honestly, I just, when you typically go look at other boards and you go and try to do research around sort of the rhyme and reason around why one thing was built into another, that's one thing that has always frustrated me, is there's never really been there's not really been a lot of those resources or that information out there around any one system. And so right now, what I'm primarily focused on with this system is getting a lot of that thought leadership out around boards in general, but then also just around giving people an idea of what we've built into the system and how they can utilize it to better progress in their climbing. We talked a lot about some of those things today, but again, there's just, I sent you an article that I'm working on. It's over 2,000 words. Like, there's so much that we put into this, and maybe people don't care, but I think that they start realizing like why we did the things we did. They'll start sort of getting a better framework for looking at boards in general and understanding like how they fit in with their schedules and how they can utilize them and what they can do and what they can't do. So yeah, again, right now it's really about just sort of getting more of those resources out there. We're trying to do a lot of that in YouTube. We're going to be doing a lot more articles lately to sort of specifically tease out what it is that we put into the system and how you can best use it to progress. So yeah, like that's my spiel as far as what we're trying to do. We're trying to just get a lot of education out there around this system and how it can be best utilized to get better.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it's, having this conversation here has enlightened me in immeasurable ways already. And I had already been on the board and already enjoyed it. So I think that education component is incredibly important, because not all boards are created equally, and people are going to gravitate to certain boards based on what their goals are or their styles are. So yeah, very thoughtful conversation today on that, and I appreciate it. More practically speaking, though, Will, if I want to buy one of these, can I buy one? What's like the production timeline like? Cost? So there's like different models. Do you get wide ones and smaller ones? You get the LEDs. What is this? Talk to me as the noob that I am.
Yeah, if we want to get into the kind of the full product pitch, lead times vary. We try and do our best to keep them, low and reasonable. Right now, I think it's like just a couple of weeks or something really short, but it can get longer depending on, how long it takes to get product from our vendors or material through manufacturing and just overall demand. We manufacture all the holds on that board except for the polyurethane that's made up in Louisville. So, we make all the wood holds, the light pipes, even the washers in the wood holds are like custom designed and produced for us.
Cool.
So just it's a lot to manage there. And I also mentioned those things because I'm about to tell you how much they cost, and they're not that cheap. So like for the full on deal for the 12 by 12, the largest size, all the hold sets and the LED kit, the retail on that's just over $13K, but we do like a bundle discount to get it down to like just over $12K. We're getting ready to go into Q3, and we've had some suppliers up prices. So we also are going to have to up prices a little bit. So if people are listening to this later on, that might be a little outdated, but they're not like going up 50% or anything crazy like that. It's like a couple $100 more for each thing. But we offer a lot of different sizes. So the core of the board is built around this 10-foot tall, 8-foot wide section. The cropping on this board is interesting to me, at least. So with the TB1, the cropping happened after the fact. Like, it was designed to be a 12 by 8 wall, and then it was actually Peter at Aurora pushed us, was like, you should just crop the top off, and then like people can put it in a smaller zone. We're like, oh, it's a great idea. Cool, let's do it. But for this one, we actually built the board from the smallest crop out rather than building the big board and cropping it in. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty critical distinction, I think, because, the small crops of the TB1 didn't necessarily climb that well. Or at least I wasn't happy with it. And so we started with that 10-foot tall, 8-foot wide section and tried to make that like the sickest little home wall you could possibly have, and then built the 12-foot wide wings onto that to sort of build off of that, because it's having that lateral size on a home wall is real cool.
Totally.
Almost better than having the height. So we've been trying to push people a little bit and be like, hey, if you have the width, then you can go 10-foot high, 12-foot wide. Like, just the simple math of it is that's more climbing square footage than 12-foot tall, 8-foot wide.
Yeah.
Being able to do those lateral moves, like, it really makes the board feel big, and you're doing a lot of moves and it's really sick. And then we also did the top extension to do a typical 12 by 8, because, that's a nice standard size. It's just 3 sheets of plywood. Like, that's why that dimension exists, because you can just go to the hardware store and get 3 sheets, and that's the size of the wall. And then also the 12 by 12, if you really want the full experience, the 12 by 12 is absolutely the best version if you can fit it.
And all those kits come with the lights as well, or is that a separate add-on?
It's a separate add-on. You can use it without the light kit and still use the app. It's honestly easier to do that on the TB2 than the TB1, or in many ways, like even easier than the kilter board, just because the holds are all very different looking. So you have better reference points. So of all of them, the moon board is probably the easiest to use without the LED kit, just because there's very few holds on it.
Right.
So there's less remembered. But of the like really high density ones, it's nice when the holds kind of look different. You can kind of understand where things lie. But yeah, the LED kits go into all of them. They're extra. And the smallest, let's see, the smallest one with no LED kit in all sets with the bundle discount is like just under 5K. But there's like taxes and shipping. Shipping's not that expensive. We get good shipping rates. We've been working on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate just like the sense for it. Obviously pricing is kind of a fluid thing. So depending on when somebody's listening, it's going to waver here or there. But, if you're talking, 5 to 13K, if you're not a gym, you don't have a massive space, you're probably going to do one of the smaller sizes if you're going to put it in your garage or if you've got tall enough ceilings in your basement. And while that's, for some people, a massive sum of money, I think for some people it's not, especially when cars cost $80,000 these days, and you're talking about a gym membership.
You think about any like, especially outdoor thing you can get into, kayaking, mountain biking, whatever. Like a nice carbon mountain bike is more than a tension board.
Yeah, it's 10 grand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so any time you get you get into it at that level, the stuff gets gets a little spendy.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I pay $1,000 a year for my gym membership, or maybe a little bit more. You know, it's just a matter of where the stoke is, I guess, where you want to invest. But I see incredible value in this, and I've got a little dinky little spray wall in my basement because I don't have tall ceilings. It's kind of a smaller, height. But we just put up some panels, and the kids climb on them, and I climb on them. And oftentimes, if that's going to save me 2 hours from trekking out to the gym, that's the option that I choose because I got a lot going on with the show and a real job and kids. And so to have something, I'm super intrigued. I'm going to go remeasure my space to see if I could get something. I like the wide but less tall because it just allows me more moves. So yeah, maybe I'll check it out. But we also have a buddy who's got a big garage. We might just convince him to be the local TB2 guy, and then we'll all just come over and toss him some bucks, or we'll all go in on it. But yeah, I'm really psyched. I'm going to post some videos. I'm going to take some videos and post them, from my early sessions here. And then I'm going to get back and try my playlist that, Michael, you made for me. So I'll, try to keep the community updated on how my training journey is going on the TB2, and certainly encourage everybody else, if you've got one around you, to check it out. We're also going to do a giveaway with you guys. We're going to do a flashboard, like a custom flashboard giveaway. Super psyched for that. So, we'll post that when this episode comes out. Keep an eye out. And teach respect for you guys. You've really been pioneering in this space for a long time, and you didn't just rest on kind of the first thing that you came out with. You put in a huge amount of effort to reevaluate and look at the next evolution of what this would be. And I've just had a total blast on the board. So I'm grateful that you brought your insights today to this conversation. And I know if anybody's listening and they're psyched and they want to learn more, they want to get in touch, they can reach out to you guys directly. I'll put some contact info in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been great.
All right, that wraps up this pro clinic here that you got in its entirety for free. Thanks to Will and Michael and the whole gang over at Tension. Thank you guys for sponsoring this pro clinic. And by the way, if y'all would like to hear some more pro clinics, you can hear all of them, in fact, for free right now with a 7-day trial over at Patreon or Apple subscriptions, depending on wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm talking about some banger bonus content as well as pro clinics with the likes of Adam Andra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Dave McLeod, Hazel Finley, Tom Randall, Alex Honnold, and so many more. It's all over there, again, with a free trial. Or if you got the means, you can toss me a few bucks a month. I'd really appreciate it. That's how I keep the lights on over here in the podcast/utility closet, and also find a little time myself to get out and do some training, which I'm going to do here now. I'm going to get out and do some board climbing. I'm so psyched about this chat here with Will and Michael today. Those guys are absolute pros when it comes to all things boards. I hope you took a lot away from it as well, and you can let me know. You can hit me up, you can hit them up on Instagram. Those links are in your show notes, and also keep an eye out on our Instagrams for this giveaway that we're doing. So sick. It's going to be a custom engraved flashboard. I'll throw in a struggle t-shirt, and that'll just be all up there on Instagram. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. The show is produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by the wonderful Glen Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the show. If you want to do something that helps me out for zero cost, you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, or just share this with one of your climbing friends or the gym that you climb at. It really helps to get the word out there. I appreciate it. I hope your training and climbing are going great, and if you are struggling like me, well, just remember the struggle makes us stronger.